Good afternoon. Welcome to the Student Achievement and District Instructional Performance Committee meeting, February the 5th, 2021. Um, Over the last year, probably the last part of last year, we as a committee elected to opt out of the Pledge of Allegiance. But with this new committee, you guys can decide if you want to include the pledge for our committee meetings. And if so, I would direct that to either Chair, our committee member Bolton or committee member Lindy, if you all want to include the pledge in this committee meeting.
Madam Chair, I'm okay not having it just because we're so limited in time and what have you. We can get right to work, and as long as we keep doing it at the board meetings, I think that's great.
Suffice. Okay, I agree. Any comments, Mr. Lindy, about that?
I was going to say I have no strong preference on this. So
All right.
sounds like we got a good plan.
We'll forge forward. First thing on our agenda is the election of the committee chair.
I would like to nominate that Pam Bowers continue as the chair, as you were chair last year, and would hope that we can close the nominations at that and have a vote.
Okay. Mr. Lenny, do you have any comments about that?
Pam, I was going to say I've never served on this committee before. I think it would be strange for me to put myself forward as chair. I'm excited to learn a lot and have no objections.
All righty. Well, should we take a vote by saying aye?
Sure.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Boom.
Okay.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Vote has been made and it's carried. All right. What I have sent to the committee was we had an approved meeting schedule the first Friday of the month. And that was what was proposed. And if there's an agreement with that, then we'll just go with that. If that's okay with all of the committee members. Okay.
It is for me.
Yes.
All right. And this week, I sent out to you guys a proposed work plan. Just to start, and what I am recommending is that you look at that work plan, and I'm hoping that the district instructional leadership team can look at it also to make sure that we are in alignment with what needs to happen over the course of the next few months. So that if you could look at that and maybe we can approve it March at our next committee meeting. Did you all receive that, committee members?
I did, yes.
Okay. Did everyone else, the district instructional leadership team, see that on board docs?
I did not.
Okay. I think Ms. Phillips added it to board docs, but I can forward it to you if you don't have it, or have her forward it to you.
Yep.
Okay.
I can email it to her. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just add to just make sure that administration and everyone has whatever is already in the protocols under committee responsibilities. I think that's important. That the protocol piece breaks down, if you will, kind of the strategic plan. That seems to be its number one thing. And I know there's at least two committees that want to flip on one assignment in particular. And so it's just important that we all use the protocol listing because I think on Monday it's going to be proposed via minutes that finance and health and safety flip on the issue. Yeah, on one thing, which requires a protocol review.
Just to be clear, SAC is not interested in flipping anything, but I agree with committee member Bolton that we need to make sure we follow that guideline.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
Can you say that one more time?
Me or Eve?
Either. I just wanted to make sure I totally followed the point.
Yeah, in our protocol, our bylaws, so to speak, we divided the strategic plan up among the standing committees, which you know. And I do know that there's been an interest between the Health and Safety Committee and the Finance Committee to flip, not exchange, but give away from one committee to the next the issue of our government liaisons not being in finance, but shifting over to health and safety. So that's going to come up Monday, briefly as part of the minutes from finance, I think. And then that's why it's important that we all know what each of us is supposed to be doing regarding the strategic plan in our committees.
Right. And board committee member Lindy, I think I sent you the 2021 in the email. Last year it was broken down. Is that what you're referencing, committee member Bolton?
Yes.
It's yeah. So you'll see it if you go back and look at the email. You'll see what she's referencing. The kind of the bylaws and the guideline, the guiding bylaws. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. For this meeting, we have two community presenters, and I believe Ms. Keeman is our first presenter. Do you want to? This was by way of former committee member, board member Morowski, directed Ms. Kennan to speak, present at this committee meeting, and we were going to do it in January. Kind of had some things we had to take care of business-wise before this to make sure we were in alignment with how to proceed with committee identification and organizational meetings. So if Ms. Kimman is ready, we would welcome her presentation.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. My name is Kim Keeman. I've been in the district for 20 years, and next to me is my daughter, Katie O'Brien. She's currently a reading specialist in the district as well. And before I get started, I just wanted to thank you all for entertaining us this afternoon and listening to what we have to say about some literacy kits that we have developed. And actually, we did this over the summer. The idea came to me it was a year ago. I was reading with a group of second graders, and we came across a contraction, actually. And I asked the child, they were stumbling over the word, and I said, do you know what this kind of a word is? And they said no. And I explained, and they go, oh, yeah, I heard of that one time. And it just hit me, and it came back the years that I've taught. Do we give children enough practice in the skills that we teach them in text, in print, that they become very adequate at reading those skills? So I began writing some stories, and this was prior to COVID. I began writing some stories kind of just for fun. And then when COVID hit over the summer, I actually sent some of those stories out to some people that I had met over the years that I consider expert in the fields, and to some publishers. And I gained quite a bit of interest, surprisingly, and very happily. So I told Katie about it, who is a reading specialist, and I was a reading specialist at one time as well. And we started to collaborate and came up with some stories, and they are accompanied with activities. And that is where we start. And I believe that you all have the PowerPoint. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ms. Ballard? Okay, great. And out of the interest and respect for your time, I won't go on and on about that. But in the second slide tells more about Katie and I and our history with the district. And just as an aside, which isn't in the PowerPoint, our illustrator with whom we've been working is also a Cincinnati Public School retired teacher. Our original market was going to be homeschoolers. Katie and I have done some summer camps on our own through the years in different neighborhoods, and people were asking us for more. So like I said, our original market was going to be homeschool and trying to help parents with their children close gaps, know a little bit more about reading. How can we help them keep their young readers on track? When COVID remained with us much longer than I know I anticipated, and probably many of you, we decided that maybe there's a place in schools for this. So we started to reach out in schools, and we're using contacts in different cities where we have friends or people in schools. And then we started kicking it around with our own colleagues here in Cincinnati. That's mostly where our hearts lie, is with Cincinnati Public. So I did reach out to Mike on the Student Achievement Committee and asked if he would get us in to talk with some people. And so that's why we are here. So the literacy kits they emphasize foundational skills, and you can read all of this. Our first kit focuses on the 6 syllable types. And what makes this a bit different than what we may have seen in the classroom through our own experience as decodable readers, we took the approach that we need to teach the children the word chunks, not just a word sound, but the chunks. And then that may help them, or will help them from our experience, to know how to decode bigger words, multisyllabic words. That's what we started to do with our series called Ned and Patrick. It is going to take you through the kit guides and what we have in production right now. And also, as an aside, when we decided to present this to Cincinnati Public Schools, we did restructure our kit. When I first sent out the stories just to get some feelers out there, we were working on compound words and the suffix ed. And then, again, when COVID struck and we were going through the hybrid model, we were thinking of other needs in the district, other needs of our teachers, what would most benefit our students. And we restructured the kit. And our first kit that we have completed, ready to go, are our stories that focus on the 6 syllable types. And then Katie will take you through some of those things and how we have our kits structured.
Okay, so the Ned and Patrick series has 4 total kits. Each kit focuses on a different skill set. I'm not going to go into great detail through this kit, but we can answer any questions you have at the end. Here is an outline, though. Kit 1 focuses on the 6 syllable types. It does have 6 books, and each book hones in on one specific skill type. Kit 2 focuses on short vowel markers with 4 books, and again, each book is centered around one short vowel marker pattern. Kit 3 has 3 books that focuses on compound words, the suffix ed, and contractions. And Kit 4 has 4 books that focuses on word chunks. Now, like Kim was saying, the different materials out there now in the Ned and Patrick series, some materials focus on an isolated skill, such as short A or A consonant E. And other materials have rich vocabulary and background knowledge, but they're filled with many different spelling patterns that students may not have learned yet, which can sometimes make a student feel less successful and become frustrated. And we see that the Ned and Patrick series encompasses all of this. In a story that focuses on one isolated skill, a student may encounter about 13 short A words that are repeated throughout the story and maybe have one sentence on the page. In one of the Ned and Patrick's stories, Planet Visit, a student could be exposed to about almost 100 different short vowel words, both 1 and 2 syllable words. And they are words that they can attack because they will have been taught the closed syllable pattern. The Ned and Patrick series, they are decodable to a student who has been taught the spelling pattern that is the focus. They are rigorous, they have adventurous stories, and they have fun-loving characters.
And the whole series, we do have Ned and Patrick as the characters throughout. They do meet other friends throughout their adventures that they go through. And I am getting a call from Cincinnati Public. If that's one of your questions, I can't answer it because I'm in the middle of it. I looked at my phone, I go, oh, anyway. So based on our personal experience, discussion with reading specialists and teachers, oftentimes they are looking for decodable books. And even in my job, I work with the community mentors quite a bit, and they will want stories that their student with whom they are working can decode. And when I pull out even DRA level books, Biscuit or Llama Pajama, alone, those titles are very difficult for our children to read. So our goal was to give the child books that have a good meaning, that have a good comprehensive story that they can attack and that they will become very familiar with and that they can build their confidence. That was the ultimate goal, because we have both seen, and many of our colleagues have seen, when students are given this knowledge, they absolutely 100% will be successful. We've seen it. I've seen it over and over again. The grades we focus on are 1 through 4. Now, our kits will have, a child will have to know the basics, the phonemic awareness, and the letter sound relationships. They will have to know that. But we figure in grade 1, we know that they are taught the syllable types. I know that that's part of foundation. And then it just goes from there. I also I thought it was ironic when the district came out with Every Child Reads in the first grade. That's most of my experiences in the first grade classrooms. So we did have alignment, and we did put quite a few notes into the PowerPoint. What we saw as our alignment with the Every Child Reads initiative. But what struck me, and I had the same exact thought, was the last presentation that we had for Every Child Reads. There was a slide that was presented that said, so often our children are given words that are nonsensical. I think the example was a pram and I don't even know. Do you remember? Very Dr. Seuss, which is fun, and there's a place for that. But out of respect for our students, I think that we need to give them things that we know that they can read, show them that we have the confidence in them that they can attack these things, and that it would make sense. And then we did this very purposefully with sight words, as well as characters that we thought our students could make connections with. And I think that's all that I have. I don't want to take up much more of your time, and we want to give you time for questions. In the back of the PowerPoint, we do have some examples of some of our work, and I do have the physical books and activities here. Each activity with the books, they are coded, book 1, activity 1, and they are color coded as well for all 6 books. And that we did through a teacher's perspective. We have spent many, many hours of our time, like all teachers do, with sight and these kids have everything laid out in a very organized fashion. And if they're not ready for the story yet, these cards are certainly available where they could teach the skill, and then present the text to the child and say, yes, you absolutely can read this. Are there any questions? Thank you so much for your time. I know how busy everyone is, and Katie, I appreciate this so very much. Are there questions right now that we could possibly answer?
Thank you both for your presentation. Committee members, do you guys have any questions for Kim? Kate, is it Katie?
Katie, yes.
Katie. For committee member Lindy?
Thanks, Pam. I thank you very much for the presentation, and I want to apologize if I missed this at the end, but was there a request or how the district could be helpful?
Yeah, well, no, you did not miss that, and I was going to say our ask is here is for consideration that somehow the district may be able to use these kits. We were thinking, when I originally began work on these, I was thinking station work. As we move through COVID, our kids are on the screen so much, we wanted to eliminate some screen time. So one idea we had was these could be purchased for possibly station work. I know in reading specialist meeting, and I have kept in touch with a lot of reading specialists, they're looking for types of materials like this. And I think that there might be a place there. Our ultimate goal would be to get some of these in classrooms so that students could have their hands and teachers could have access to these kinds of things very quickly without having to search for them. And then I even took it one step further as we stayed in the hybrid model, that these could be very beneficial to our students who are at home. Again, to eliminate some screen time, to get a physical book with print, gaining meaning from print in a book that they could work on at their homes as well.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the work you've done and the additional clarity on what would be helpful. For Pam, is now an appropriate time for us to share our reactions?
Yeah, comments, feedback, inquiries.
All I was going to say is I would totally defer to Laura on this. You know, I think like if that's the kind of thing you and Tiana thought were helpful for the district, sounds great. If you all think that it's not for whatever reason, well, I totally trust you.
Thank you for that.
Committee member Bolton?
Yeah, I was very happy to hear that you think of it as station work. I'm a huge fan of that. I just think that works at all levels, from the littlest people to our tallest people. I just really, didn't ever have to use it necessarily when I was teaching, but everything I've watched and observed, it's very hands-on, and the kids are up and about and what have you, and I like station work. I guess we would refer it for, I won't use the word review because that has legal terms to it, but maybe the administration could look over this. It's hard for me to believe that anything could necessarily happen that would impact instruction this year. But as we look at the coming year, whether we're in person or we're something else, God knows what. But if the administration, I know they don't have very much time, but it might not be a bad thing for them to be able to look at a set of these and think about it. I'm thrilled that everybody involved with it is a CPS instructor, artist. I know we have such talent in the district, and it's great to be thinking about this. But with Mr. Lindy, I wouldn't be the one that would know anything beyond that. But certainly the administration can check things out as they have time to do so, if they find this of value. And I was also happy to hear the word attack. That's such a reading specialist word. I mean, I don't know any other teachers that use the word attack except the reading teachers, but go for it. Appreciate that. So, yes, I'm with Mr. Lindy, and we have to leave it to the administration, but thanks for the presentation.
And I appreciate that very much. And both of us, when we went through this, I can't tell you how often I did station work, and these types of things were written on index cards or little pieces of paper. And so with our colleagues in mind, we thought it would be nice to have all this. But I appreciate all of the feedback that you're giving us. It's so appreciative.
Great.
Thank you both. Oh, Superintendent?
Yes. So the administration, we will definitely look at the materials, but we'll also check with legal counsel in terms of a conflict of interest. If an employee was able to gain some knowledge through training that we've offered and then create a product that then they turn around and sell back to us. And so we'll look at that as well.
Oh, that's an excellent point, one that we would have never thought of. So thank you. And that would just be through the district? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you both for your presentation. This will be also included in our report to the full board. All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think next on our agenda is the young activist, Yusuf Munir and his peers. And he also, hi Yusuf.
Sorry.
I just want to that's okay, give a brief overview of how you, by way of former committee member, current board member Mike Morawski, were directed in this area also, including Health and Safety Committee. I wasn't really sure where you guys were with that, but I know that we had talked about you being able to present here. So take it away.
Before I get started, Luke, can you try and talk just to see if your thing is working? Okay, perfect. How do I? Oh, okay, you already have it open. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Young Activist Coalition has recently started our Fix Our Schools campaign, which is really aimed at making sure that students' voices are heard in the decisions that are being made around our schools. And because of some personal experiences that I had, and also just the overwhelming research that points to two of the biggest problems in schools nationwide, but also in CPS specifically, we decided to tackle police presence in schools and the use of punitive discipline over restorative practices. Kayla, if you want to talk about, could you go to the next slide? Kayla.
Okay, so I just want to preface this by saying that anytime we refer to the data collection in this presentation, we are discussing data from the Civil Rights Data Collection run by the U.S. Department of Education. While the most current data on this site is from the 2017-18 school year, the same trends can be seen across all the years for which data has been collected, and no policies have been implemented within CPS since that school year that would have resulted in any significant changes in these trends. So through this data, you will see how Black students are disproportionately punished and referred to the police. In the 2017-18 school year, total district enrollment was 62.7% Black. However, Black students made up 83.2% of in-school suspensions. Next slide. Black students made up 86.1% of out-of-school suspensions. Next slide, please. And Black students made up 86.7% of expulsions. It is also very important to note that even if these numbers were proportionate to the total district enrollment, it still does not make sense to be taking kids out of class to punish them, thereby making them lose more instruction time. We should instead be implementing restorative and transformative practices. And next slide. Finally, Black students made up 84.9% of referrals to law enforcement in the 2017-18 school year. So when we look at all of this data collected, Black students in CPS are 5 times more likely than their white peers to face exclusionary discipline. Next slide, please. Okay, so some national and state statistics and trends. According to a study done by the UCLA Civil Rights Project, 36% of Black male students with disabilities enrolled in middle and high schools nationally were suspended at least once in the 2009-2010 school year. A quarter of Black secondary school children and nearly a third of Black middle school males were suspended at least once in that same school year. The data shows that schools with police have 3.5 times as many arrests as those without police, and this has nothing to do with any differences in crime rates or the number of misbehaviors, but rather higher rates of criminalization for petty misbehaviors. And finally, in Ohio, Black girls are arrested at 3 times the rate of white girls. Next slide.
Intersection of police and ableism. According to a report by the Ruderman Family Foundation, 50% of people that die at the hands of police have a disability. And another study reports that those with disabilities have a higher cumulative probability of arrest, and that this risk is disproportionately spread across races and ethnicities, with Black people with disabilities experiencing the highest cumulative probability of arrest and white people without disabilities experiencing the lowest. According to data from the Civil Rights Data Collection, while IDEA students, IDEA standing for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, while they only make up 19% of CPS enrollment, they make up 41% of referrals to law enforcement. Being multiply marginalized, for example, students that are Black and disabled, puts them at an even more disproportionate risk for being referred to law enforcement and overall being subjected to exclusionary discipline. Next slide.
When examining police presence in our schools, it is necessary to first and foremost recognize that police do not protect Black, brown, and other marginalized groups of students, but endanger them. Due to the harm of criminalizing students, it is necessary to create an entirely new system rather than simply privatizing an existing harmful one. Concern for the safety of students and teachers in our schools is completely valid, especially with fears of gun violence. However, police do not prevent these tragedies, but rather respond after the fact. Unlike these tragedies, the oppression and criminalization of Black and brown students by the police is not rare. In order it is necessary to invest in proactive measures that will end the criminalization of our students. Next slide.
Luke, are you able to talk?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. How do we prevent harm in our schools? Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. How do we prevent harm in our schools? In order to keep students safe, disciplinary incidents must be prevented by restorative practices, rather than just responded to with suspensions or expulsions. 1.7 million students attend schools with police presence, but no counselors. This means that school districts across the country are prioritizing the criminalization of children over helping them learn and grow within their school environment. We need to hire more counselors, psychologists, and social workers who are trained to prevent the root causes of harm in schools. According to data gathered by the ACLU, studies have shown improved attendance rates, better academic achievement, and higher graduation rates, as well as lower rates of suspension, expulsion, and other disciplinary incidents, all as a result of more counselors, and the opposite for placing more cops on campus. In addition to this, schools must respond to harm not by seeking to punish, but by working to heal all parties involved through restorative and transformative justice.
Next slide, please.
Slide, please. Restorative justice is a system that is designed to provide restoration to victims, communities, and offenders. Rather than simply punishing an offender and ignoring the victim, the model that we currently have of punishing students is known as retributive justice. Transformative justice is similar to restorative justice, but seeks to also change the larger social structure as well as the personal structure of those involved, thereby transforming all parties and broader systems for the better. In schools, restorative and transformative justice can include restorative talking circles, the creation of an environment of mutual respect and care, and other forms of conflict resolution. For example, when a student harms another student in a school environment, whether it be stealing from them or physically hurting them or just saying something nasty, it spreads harm farther than the two of them. In our current model, we simply punish the offender without trying to heal that harm in their relationship, but the harm that may have been created in the school community at large. Restorative justice seeks to repair that harm, involve all parties effective, and make sure everyone gets what they need, whereas retributive justice, with punishments such as suspensions and expulsions, objectively creates more harm than good. It is important to note two things about these new systems of accountability. One, they are proven to be effective when implemented properly, for example, in the Oakland City School District in California, and two, these systems cannot properly coexist with the police, our criminal justice system being highly retributive and incompatible with a learning environment. Next slide, please.
Oftentimes, whenever any criticism is leveled at the police presence in Cincinnati public schools and the involvement of SROs within our school communities, this is responded to with the point that SROs have a good relationship with the students in the schools where they're stationed and serve a positive role within the school community. Incredibly critical to understand is that even if these good relationships do exist, this does not in any way change the statistical realities of how justice is carried out. Black and brown students are still disproportionately criminalized regardless of any relationships. The job of the police is to criminalize and arrest. Attempting to make SROs do a job that they are not designed or trained to do is a waste of resources. The employment of mental health professionals, psychologists, or social workers could fill the role that SROs are claimed to fill in a much better way than they can. Next slide, please.
And so ultimately, this brings us to what we recommend for a truly equitable and anti-racist CPS. We recommend the ending of school policing, including SROs and police equipment, replacing zero-tolerance policies and the police with restorative justice practices, clarifying reporting channels for prohibited behavior, including staff actions, in order to apply restorative and transformative justice practices, not just to students, but also to all staff as a way to better the entire community. And then 4, create a community implementation board to oversee policy enactment. And 5, expand and publicize the Speak Up, Speak Out membership to any interested students so that it is truly representative of all students. Do you guys have any questions? We do have a folder with that contains like all of our research and with more specifics than is on the slide, because obviously we want it to be a little bit more brief. Can I drop that somewhere in the chat for all of you to have?
Sure. Thank you, Yusuf.
Do I just put that in the moderator chat?
Are you able to receive that, moderator?
Yeah, we can, and then we can share it with Phyllis. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Yusuf. Committee members, do you have any comments or questions for, thank you to the Young Activist Coalition for your thorough presentation. Do any committee members have any questions or comments? Committee member Lindy? You're on mute, Ben.
Right. How about this? Better?
Yeah.
Thanks, Pam. I had a nice chance to meet with the Young Activist Coalition yesterday and got a chance to see this presentation yesterday, and I really appreciated it. I thought the presentation was very well done. I wanted to just say here some of the same things I shared with them yesterday, and I think I'm sure I will miss some, but I'll do my best. I mentioned to them some civil rights leaders in Cincinnati whose perspective is very influential with me, and then shared that were they to get some of those folks on board with their demands, it would certainly be very influential with me as well. I also, I wanted to, this is something I don't actually know a ton about, and I'm glad we have the superintendent here because I wanted to just learn more about it. How does participation in the Speak Up, Speak Out group work?
Is that a question for Superintendent? Oh, okay, there she is.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks.
So it isn't limited to a few students. We opened it up pretty widely when it first began. I actually met with the core team of the Speak Up, Speak Out group today, and we'll be bringing a presentation to the board soon. But I'll invite Assistant Superintendent Murphy to give some more details because she actually worked with her team to launch the very first session.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this past spring, we actually initiated the Speak Up, Speak Out students. We were away from school buildings at that time, and so we had a representative group from each of our local high schools, and then it began to grow. They continued to meet throughout the summer, discussing their interests, sharing with Superintendent Mitchell their demands, and as she mentioned today, they did meet as a planning team and are looking forward to continuing with their interests throughout this school year.
I get that's really helpful, Shauna. I think one of the questions I was trying to ask is if students wanted to try to join in the future, will there be an opportunity when people could apply who aren't currently a part of it?
I believe so. Yeah, we've actually added since we started this work last spring, and so I believe so. Yes.
Sorry, I'm just going to clarify. We're asking for it to be open so that any students who are interested can join whenever. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to hear, Yusuf. I think I'll only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I can certainly understand with the need to limit the size of it in order to make it manageable. I do think that an open and transparent process is a pretty reasonable request. And the idea that there be future intake points feels super reasonable to me. And again, just speaking for myself. And then the last thing I was going to say was I was particularly compelled by the graph that they shared that showed on the one hand, here's the percentage racial composition of the district. And then on the other hand, here's the composition racially of discipline items. I think it was suspensions and expulsions. And, you know, I will sound like a broken record to Pam and to Eve on this, but I really do believe in setting a small number of concrete outcomes for us as a district and focusing on them. And the idea that at one point, one of those could be narrowing racial gaps in discipline feels very compelling to me. And I think, yeah, that's all. I'm sure we said some other things yesterday, but I was encouraging, you know, for Pam even and Laura, I was encouraging Yusuf and others to attend Iris's meetings on Wednesdays or Fridays. I know the superintendent is there with some frequency, but that leadership, I think, is a good group for them to be talking to.
Committee Member Bolton, do you have any comments or feedback? Did I see your hand raised, Committee Member Bolton? You're on mute.
I think Yusuf was going to respond before
I was just going to, thank you, Ms. Bolton. I was just going to say that I would just like to clarify that the thing that we're advocating for is not a proportionate punishment of Black and white and brown students. It is the complete building of a new restorative system that seeks not to punish but to heal through restorative and transformative practices, which Bella and Kayla touched upon. We're advocating for the building of a new system because even if white students are punished proportionately and Black students are punished proportionately, the issue is that they're still being punished and taken out of class for things that can be solved in more effective and healing manners that really benefit our entire community.
Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation, and let me react to several parts of it if I can. I'm particularly interested in the, I won't say merger, but also involving the issue of those students that have, are experiencing some sort of learning disability. That also is a major civil rights issue with all of us, the over-identification and what have you that occurs nationwide. And I would say too that how shall I? And I'm glad to see that, and where the compounding of both race or second language and disability starts to play in, especially in the earlier years. Much of Cincinnati Public kind of that evolves and improves as the children are going through the system. At least that's the statistics I've seen. So I appreciate you adding that in. Another piece is that there's a program at Aiken, my alma mater. You might want to talk to Principal Vota about some of the issues that they've been dealing with. She has some very creative and progressive sorts of things that kind of try to decriminalize and redirect. So that might be a program to look at. Another issue for me is that, and I'll just say it because I want to be honest with you, an actual removal of police officers is sort of a non-starter with me, and you'll not be surprised to know that. But I do think that, because it's been around for 50 years, I can't think of too many things that have been around for 50 years that have so few infractions. But I do think that, and part of my reasoning there is it's reasonable success on a number of items. I really don't want police from outside coming in to adjust our problems. That to me would be difficult for the city and for the school. But I do think that we should review some aspects of the police piece, largely because our schools are not the only schools that they're in. Our schools invariably are used as their base, and they are also serving our elementary schools, but they're also serving some parochial and also some charter geographically. So I think that's something to be looked at. So it's not just us. And I think finally, I don't want to. I'll be a history teacher instead of defensive about this. But this particular committee's been working on some of these issues with some degree of success for several years. And I do think that there's been great improvement in some areas, perhaps not enough, but I know there's been the commitment. And I know we've used, if you will, the U.S. Department of Education Civil Rights Division until the Trump administration got rid of it to help us address some of these issues. So I think it's a tremendous discussion to have, especially in line of equity and the race policies. But I would encourage you to look at whatever they're doing at Aiken. You know about the police, but I do think we can review some of that as well. And I appreciate the presentation.
So I just want to say, I know that you had mentioned about how the SRO program has been around for, I think you said 50 years, and that there aren't, there's few infractions, but part of that is because the SROs aren't actually required to report to, so we wouldn't have no way of knowing if anything bad had happened with them. So I think it's important to recognize that the reason it doesn't appear that there are many bad things happening with it is because they don't have to tell anything. And I think.
Well, if I might, Madam Chair, I wouldn't overstate they don't have to tell anything, because they are still held accountable at the building and the district level, and more particularly within their own police units and the city department. So I think if we have a transparency issue, that might be one thing, but they are held somewhat, perhaps greatly accountable. But again, there's things that we can review about this for sure. But again, I think the biggest part that we should be doing that you can help us with certainly is sort of this in the next CPS, so to speak, continuing to make a commitment to not just the restorative justice piece, but a whole revamp as we're seeing it. And I think think the district's on its way to doing some of that, and I'm sure you can be helpful. And as to the speak out and what speak up, I think it wouldn't be unusual or wrong to occasionally have plenary sessions where indeed there could be broader access, but I would treat it as a plenary extension of the group to address Mr. Lindy's point about if a group is too large, that could be a problem, but the fact is you also don't want it to be an elite group only. So plenary sessions might be a way to approach that.
I was just
keeping in concept, Yusuf, I'm sorry to cut you off, and keeping it in content with our time, because I
Ms.
think.
Bowers, could I just say one thing really quick? Sorry.
One more thing, Yusuf, and then we have several other items to move on to.
Perfect, no worries. Ms. Bowers, I would just, according to a memorandum of understanding that we received from CPS, CPS signed over all rights as to the number and placement of SROs to the CPD. So CPS legally has no control over that, according to the memorandum of understanding that we received from CPS, the district. So I would just say CPS legally has very little control over the program, especially given that the contract is between the city and CPS with conjunction to CPS signing over any right to the data.
Right. Were you able to send that information in the chat to our moderator?
Yes, okay. I put all of our research into a Google Drive folder and then put it in the moderator chat.
All right. Thank you, Young Activist Coalition, for your presentation. Again, it was a well put together presentation and for the dialogue. And we'll look at that to review. Thank you. All right. Our next agenda item is updates. And I believe this is Justin and Tiana regarding the Iowa test, Walnut Hills entry data.
Yes, good afternoon. Today I'm joined with Mr. Leach, Director of Testing, and we also invited the principal of Walnut Hills to join in this presentation. So we will give you an update on the entrance exams, share some data, and then Mr. Chambers, the principal of Walnut, will talk about student support. Once students are accepted into Walnut, what supports are in place to help them in the learning environment and help them continue to have continued success there. So I will pass it over to Justin.
Good afternoon, committee members. Can you just confirm that you can see the slide deck on the screen? Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. I'm just going to start off quickly with some background information about the Walnut Hills exam, and I'm going to start with the Ohio whole grade gifted screening requirement. The Walnut Hills exam is actually a byproduct of this state requirement to offer gifted screening assessments at two grade bands, that first grade band being the K2 grade band, and then once again in the grade 3 through 6 grade band. So we conduct whole grade screenings at second grade and sixth grade to meet that requirement in the area of cognitive ability, reading, mathematics, and then also science and social studies. And it's the reading and mathematics sections that we also at sixth grade utilize for the Walnut Hills entrance exam. Refresh some information about the Iowa assessment and why we shifted to the Iowa assessment a couple years ago. That dealt with the end of the contract with Data Recognition Corporation, which provided the previous Walnut Hills entrance exam, which was the Terra Nova Achievement Assessments. So in the spring of 2019, there was a request for proposal, and that process was long overdue. We had been using the 2011 version of the Terra Nova, so that was the end of about a 6-7 year contract, that led to this request for proposal process in the spring of 2019. That committee, which included Principal Chambers, teachers, intervention specialists, and Department of Student Services staff, formed some requirements around this RFP. One, that it had to be ODE approved gifted assessment. We were looking for flexibility in administration to be able to deliver both paper and online versions of the assessment. Of course, it had to be a valid and reliable assessment, a nationally normed assessment, and we were looking for the most recent national norms on those assessments. So that process led to the selection of Riverside Publishing as the provider of the Iowa and COGAT assessments. They had recent norms from 2017. At the time, Terra Nova was unable to provide a recent norming study that they had conducted. Additionally, we found value in some of the flexibility around supporting English learners. The Logramos assessment is a state-approved gifted assessment that's a Spanish trans-adapted gifted assessment. So that, the committee found particular value in that assessment alternative. And then again, the ability to administer online or via paper was another important feature in that RFP process. So the use of the Iowa assessment in 6th grade, again, also is used as not just a gifted screening assessment, but the Walnut Hills entrance exam. So this diagram just shows how the scores from those assessments are utilized for the Walnut Hills entrance exam. The reading and vocab tests are combined to create a reading total national percentile rank, and then the math and computation test are combined to form the mathematics total national percentile rank. And essentially there are 3 requirements for a student to meet in order to be eligible for entrance in the Walnut Hills. That's the 65th percentile on both the reading total and math total, but then a combined 140 when you add those 2 composites together. So you can see that the 65th percentile does not quite get you to that 140, so it would at least have to be a 70-70 in that instance, but you could have a 65th percentile and a 90th percentile, and that would meet eligibility. If a student does not meet all 3 requirements they are eligible for an additional retake attempt within the school year. So per those ODE guidelines around gifted assessments, students are afforded 2 attempts within a school year. Typically, we also wait 60 days for that reassessment. That gives time for families to get the data back, identify strengths and weaknesses from that attempt in order to inform a reassessment on one or both parts of Walnut Hills entrance exam. And then we use the highest attempt from both of those administrations. So it's almost like a super score across both of those attempts. And I would also like to point out that the 65th percentile was maintained from the Terra Nova assessment. That was the benchmark on that previous nationally normed assessment. We maintained that moving forward with the Iowa assessment. Last year, we did conduct a concordance study that compared those 2011 Terra Nova normed results to the 2017 normed Iowa assessments. So we utilized historical Terra Nova data along with the 1920 Iowa 2nd and 6th grade results for the fall assessment. And additionally, we were able to administer the assessment to 7th graders at Walnut Hills to give some more direct comparison points between those 2 assessments. What was found in that concordance study is that essentially the scale score on the old Terra Nova assessment, the scale score that would require a 65th percentile equated to a 51st or 53rd percentile on those more recently normed Iowa assessments, math assessments. For reading on the Terra Nova, that scale score that would have led to a 65th percentile on that 2011 normed assessment was around a 45th percentile. Not unsurprising data, again, just due to the number of years that had passed forming of the Terra Nova assessment to the Iowa assessment. At that point, assessments run the risk of becoming overexposed when they're not reviewed on what we're now doing on a 3-year kind of cycle. Every 3 years, reviewing for the most recent assessments. So that's the explanation for that difference between those percentile ranks. So this fall, between the period of October 12th and November 20th, during the blended learning time that we had in the fall, we were able to offer the opportunity at 2nd and 6th grade to assess in person with the Iowa assessment. We made a determination over the summer. For example, MAP is also a gifted assessment, but we made a determination in conjunction with the Student Services Department that if we use an assessment remotely, that we would not utilize that as a gifted assessment. That left the Iowa assessment in person as our gifted screening assessment for this school year. Ahead of that window, we were able to send out letters via school messenger to families, giving them some information about that test. You've got a copy of the letter there, and that provided some information about the format, the timing of the test, the number of items on the test, and we were able to translate that letter into Arabic, French, Nepali, and Spanish based on the various home languages of families. So looking at the results from fall 2020, first let's look at the percentage unassessed. There was a drop in completion of the Iowa assessment as some students were enrolled at CDA, elected not to participate in this assessment. We last fall were at 11% unassessed, around 290 to 292 students, and that increased to 34% in reading, 44% in mathematics. So once we had that data, we worked quickly with the administration at Walnut Hills to begin talking about how much flexibility and extended windows could we offer this year. So we've talked with Principal Chambers and his team. Typically, they're doing registrations in March. We've pushed that back out into May so that we could offer an additional makeup window here in the winter. So right now in February is an opportunity for students that did not have an opportunity in the fall to complete makeup testing in the month of February. And to support that, robocalls and emails and phone calls were sent in December to any student with a missing test part from the fall to let them know about this opportunity. Initially, we were planning to potentially bring in students if we were remote, but now that we're in a blended model, schools have that ability to schedule this testing through the month of February. And then, of course, retesting has been offered in January and February, and then I'll talk more about some additional administration dates that we're offering, including March 6th. So looking at achievement from the fall administration, we'll first focus on these first two columns, which is a comparison of where we were at the fall this year to fall of last year. And this is just through the in-district administration of the Iowa assessment. So we do see a drop in the overall number of students. That drop is not proportionate to the number of students that were unassessed. So it's less of a decrease in the overall that we were expecting when we saw those increased unassessed numbers. Some points to note here, we saw a decrease from fall 19 to fall 20 in the percentage of Black students that were eligible through this first round of testing. There was an increase, white students by 4%.
Justin, can I ask a clarifying question as you're going
yes.
here? When you say eligible, you mean passed the test and got in. Is that right?
Correct. So yeah, that met those three requirements.
I got it. I'm with you. The eligible thing was not on me. I got it.
No worries. But we did see an increase from 1% to 3%, and that ties back to that the ability to offer that Logramos assessment instead of the Iowa assessment for English learners, some English learners. Over here are two columns of notes. This is our students last year, essentially where we ended up through that first round of first use of Iowa assessments in 2019-2020, and then a direct comparison to that last group of students that took the Terra Nova assessment in 2018-2019. And of course, there are more eligible students than listed here. These are actually enrollment numbers down here, while these are eligible numbers at that point in time. So this number continued to increase in 1920, and there have been more students that have been assessed on the weekend administration. So this number will continue to increase as well. But we wanted to give you that point-to-point comparison of the last Terra Nova group to that first Iowa group, the current 7th graders. So there was an overall decrease in the number of students that enrolled at 7th grade to 8th grade. But if you look at the demographic numbers, there was not huge shifts in the composition by ethnicity of the students. And if anything, there was a slightly more diverse group of students in that 1920 Iowa assessment versus that last Terra Nova assessment. But obviously still improvements that need to be made here in terms of making that representative of the population of students in our total 7th grade. The next few pages, I won't spend too much time here, just information for the board. This is a building by building comparison from fall 19 to fall 20. Again, this is just point to point at this point that we have the data. There's more data incoming from our weekend administrations and makeup opportunities in schools coming up in February. So these numbers will grow and more schools might be added on here, but a fall to fall comparison. Some schools that had students in 19 did not have eligible students in the fall. Other schools, we see some relative stability from fall 19 to this year, 40 for Kilgore, down to just 36 for this fall. And a few more schools here, and then the overall district. So I won't spend any more time on that, but just wanted to make sure that the board members have that data as well. Additionally, we've been offering weekend administrations back in October and November 17th. So of course, those were strictly following COVID safety protocols. We've bulked up the number of staff that we utilize for those weekend administrations so that we could test no more than 9 students in a room. So we've got very small groups maintaining 6 feet apart during these weekend administrations, and they've been successful on maintaining safety. In terms of our 6th grade students that took tests on these 2 particular dates, we had 113 non-CPS enrolled 6th graders take the tests on these weekend fall administrations, and 73 of those students were eligible. This is the breakdown of that by what we know about ethnicity. We don't collect that information upon registration of non-CPS students, but there are some students that are enrolled in our Power School because they live within the district. So we do have a little bit of data, and we'll be able to update that information as students enroll at Walnut Hills. Breakdown of the school of location, again, not necessarily information we collect upon registration, so that explains that unknown of 26 there. This is the same chart. These are 2 new columns here that add those non-CPS eligible students to the CPS students that were eligible through fall testing. That brings that total eligible mark up to 283 all across those 2 groups of students. That's compared to a 388 point last year. And you see similar trends in the data that we saw from the just CPS, a slightly smaller percentage of Black students eligible, an increase in white students, an increase by 2 percentage points for Latinx students in that total group. So we are continuing to offer retest opportunities at the weekend administrations. So those students that missed the test in the fall, we're able to test them in our buildings. Those students that are seeking a retest opportunity, we had 40 first-time test takers back in January, 27 retest attempts. We're processing those results right now. We have an additional 167 sixth graders scheduled for next Saturday, 129 first-time test takers, 38 retests. And then we've added additional dates, pushed back that Walnut Hills registration date so that we can offer a testing date on March 6th, and as well for April 10th. And that April 10th date, we are going to be prioritizing CPS students, especially those students that we're retesting here in February. And I'll turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Amat to talk about some trends on Walnut Hills progress or report card.
I just wanted to highlight the report card trends and gap closing progress, prepare for success, and graduation. If you look at the progress on Walnut's report card, 2016 and 2017, we were at a D. And so that's looking at basically closing the gap. Here we were at a B, and then the last report card, Walnut Hills, had all A's. And it really speaks to the work and leadership of the staff at Walnut Hills. So Mr. Chambers is here to share some of the work that they do there once students are enrolled.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent, and thank you, committee, for giving me the opportunity to share some of the things that we're doing here at Walnut. Mr. Leach has talked to you guys about how students get to Walnut Hills, but we found out as, this is my 11th year in the building, going to my 4th year as principal, and it was the goal to find a way to reduce the number of students that fell out of Walnut Hills for any particular reason. Historically, those numbers of 7th and 8th graders that fell out of Walnut was around 13 to 15%, and so we were looking at ways to decrease those numbers and to lower the attrition rate that we have with our students. So, we were able to write a grant, and we received a grant through AGS, and that was a 3-year grant, and it allowed us to hire 3 teachers to run what we call the Student Success Center. And if you look at the chart here, in 2017-18, we had 11% of our 7th graders that failed out and 5% of the 8th graders. With the implementation of the Success Center, those numbers reduced to 5% and 4%. And then the 1920 school year, it's 2% and 2%. So, the Success Center, obviously has had a huge impact on increasing our retention rate, especially with students of color, because we found that the vast majority of the students who were not being successful here at Walnut were students of color. We can move to the next slide, please. The Student Success Center is, we have several goals, but the goal is to provide like tutoring, coaching, and academic support, for our junior high kids, but also provide some social and emotional support as well. And it's just not to retain students to be eligible to stay at Walnut, but it's also to improve their overall grades, their standardized test scores, and also give those students confidence to be successful here at Walnut. Again, we have 3 FTEs allocated to the Success Center. We have a director of tutor and a tutoring coordinator, a study skills person, and intervention supports, who is an actual licensed certified intervention specialist. So those students that come with those the needs that, are not quite worthy of an IEP or 504, we do have someone in that position that can address those student deficiencies and get those students on the right track. The Success Center is available for all students in grades 7 and 8. But we do, because we have, limited resources with the 3 teachers, we make an initial assessment of the students. We take the 60 students 60 or so students who score below 145 composite score on the entrance exam. So those are the initial kids that we have come to the Success Center. Once those students are assessed, there's a 6-week period where those students are have those services available to them, and students cycle out based on the level of success that they're experiencing. And we have a mechanism where if a student was not identified in that first group, that the counselors and or teachers can make referrals to the Success Center for students that may be struggling, that may just have gotten past because they did really well on the test. So, we, along with giving those interventions to our 7th and 8th graders, we do, it has a dual, purpose for us. It gives our high school students the opportunity to give that, peer tutoring, to not only give back to help the younger kids, but it's things that the older kids can do to boost their self-esteem and their what they give back to Walnut. There you go. Thank you. Like I said, the initial criteria is either that 145 or lower on the entrance exam, low grades, and I'm not going to read these things to you, but we do, like I said, we have a 6-week success plan for the students. The students come every day during their study hall, and they receive the services from the members of the Success Center. It has been widely successful, and hopefully we're able to retain the teachers in the Success Center. But as I said, the grant is running out. But we are looking for creative ways to continue that. So that is our Student Success Center. Thank you, guys.
So with that, go ahead, Ms. Amat.
That concludes the presentation, and I would like to say that Mr. Leach did send out the presentation on Wednesday to all board members. So now, if there are any questions, we're open for discussion and answering any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Ahmad, Justin, and Mr. Chambers for that presentation. Committee Member Bolton, I'll let you go. I did have some inquiries and comments. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ms. Bolton.
just thank you. For what's the pool of the test takers? How is it determined who's going to take the Walnut test to get in? As the 6th graders, are they referred? I mean, I think you've touched on this, but I just want to be clear about that. Are they referred, or is it limited? Is it everyone in the district?
Yes, great question. So outside of 2nd and 6th grade, for gifted assessments, students are referred either by a parent or a guardian or a staff member. But at 2nd and 6th grade, and 6th grade is used for the Walnut Hills entrance exam, that is offered for all 6th grade students. So it's part of the whole grade screening. So all 6th grade students have an opportunity and are assessed in the fall. And then they have that opportunity to retest one more time if they want. And at that point, it's based on sign up.
Mm-hmm. All right. Then that sounded diplomatic or something. Help me with the language on that. All sixth
graders take the test in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And all 2nd graders are assessed as grade gifted.
So, and all 6th graders' families know that they are at that time taking the Walnut entrance test.
Correct. All sixth grade families received a message through robocall, email, and phone call with information about the test in late September, early October, ahead of the window opening up.
And people aren't able to opt out of it. We have that as our, we test every child, and then that's a matter of record.
Yes, typically that would be the case. At this point this year, there were some families, for example, families that were at CDA. They had the opportunity to have their student come in, but some families elected not to proceed with this assessment this year.
Okay. Yeah, it's an extraordinary year, and it's okay. I understand that. I'm just saying we want to make sure that everybody knows that in our district, every child does take that test.
Correct.
And could have access to Walnut in second and sixth grade. And then also the Center for Success, I think Chairman Bowers and I probably would be asking him the same question. I think, is the grant with Accelerate Great Schools?
Yes, it is.
And is that the program that Ms. Bowers and I would know as MindPrint?
That is a one of the
yes,
one of the assessments that they use. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I just thank you for that, Committee Member Bolton. That was important to for me to make note of that. I have a question regarding the and I want to think that former committee member Morowski, current board member, had inquired about the Walnut Hills test being available at different sites. Do you remember that, Mr. Leach, that was an inquiry when he was on the committee? Was that if this was available at different sites just because of our unique situation this year?
Sites defined as school buildings?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, this was administered at each school building.
Okay, all right. Even in COVID, were we back in blended learning when the test occurred?
Yes, we were in
blended
learning.
Okay, I think he wanted. Okay, maybe that was an earlier discussion. But with regards to and I'm just a particular on rigorous academia across our whole district. We talked about rolling back certain preparation for students as they move up into high school. With regards to the 113 non-CPS enrolled and looking at the lower number of some of our neighborhood schools that actually had, I guess, been able to pass or be eligible, is there a possibility for us to kind of evaluate how that is and why that is that we have such a decrease in our specifically our African American students with even being eligible for the test? And I commend you, Mr. Chambers, about all the work you're doing with sustaining and identifying that there's a gap there. But I'm just thinking, I'm trying to figure out what we can do around that. If there are any ideas that you guys have looked at, especially with our neighborhood schools. Our neighborhood schools is what I'm really focused on.
Yes, absolutely. It starts with curriculum. So in the past 3 years, we have had a heavy focus, especially with the partnership with Zach, to look at our curriculum. We started 3 years ago with ELA. This year we did math. The upcoming year we will do science. It starts with not only having a strong, rigorous curriculum, but ensuring that kids have access to grade level content. So we are doing, we're strengthening the core. We're working with our teachers on how to do scaffold learning to ensure that all kids have access to grade level content. The other thing that we want to do is make sure that we have kind of college prep, because Walnut Hills is a college preparatory school. But having those early opportunities in 5th and 6th grade for our students as well.
Which I believe we talked about before with regards to, in general, across all of our schools, at high schools for AP or AA classes or what have you, and even the IB curriculum over at Roberts and Dater. So, okay. All right. Committee Member Bolton, did you have your hand up again before I go to Mr. Lindy?
I was
I saw you.
admonishing my German shepherds.
Oh, okay. All right. Committee member Lindy.
Thanks, Pam. I appreciate it. Are we hard stop at 3:30 or do we go longer?
We're supposed to stop at 3:30. But we really need to get through the other agenda items though, really.
Okay. That's great. I can be swift on this. I had a question I wanted to ask sometime to link back up with the Laura evaluation discussion we had at the board work session. I want to stick it at the end, or I can even potentially bring it up next time.
Actually, that's on the other part. We can talk about that in a little bit. But no, that's part of the other business today.
That's great. So Justin, I had just two things on this. Can you bring up slide 8 again? Mr. Chambers, it's also great to meet you. I'm a very proud Walnut alum, and I've heard your name many, many times, but I don't know if we've been in a meeting together before. And it's very nice to put a face and a voice with a name.
Pleasure meeting you as well, Mr.
Okay, can you see slide 8?
I see slide 7.
Oh.
Great. Okay, I wanted to make sure I was reading this correctly. Is yellow the last... what is the last year that we used the old test? Is that the blue column?
Yeah, that's our current 8th graders at Walnut. So they took the Terra Nova in the fall of the school year of 2018-19. Then this is the first group of Iowa, which is our current 7th grade.
Great. And the current world that we're experiencing is the orange column.
Correct. This is through fall. CPS only. So this was the in-school whole grade 6th grade gifted screening assessment.
Okay, so I think the thing that really worries me about the numbers that I'm seeing here is if you look at the blue column for white students, in the old test, 64% of white students were getting in. We switch tests, and a couple years later, that goes up to 77%. And then if we look at black students, it was 22% under the old test. We switch tests, go forward 2 years, and it goes down to 10%. So I think the concern I have is that looks like it's exacerbating and like doing the opposite of what a equity move would be doing.
Yes, and that I think at this time last year that was the concern as well. Because at this point last year, it was at 73%, which was also an increase. And then through the retest opportunities, these numbers ended up in terms of actual enrollment here. So that's not a guarantee that would happen again this year, but in terms of what we saw through the initial attempt last year to the actual final eligibility pool and then enrollment, these numbers became, the second column became the third column. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's incredibly helpful because it's a very different story. You know, like at least as I look at those numbers, it looks like likelihood of admission stayed about the same for black students, and likelihood of admission actually went down a little bit for white students. And that's a very different story than the move from blue to orange. And so your argument is that the accurate story is the blue to yellow story.
That was the final product of the transition from Terra Nova to Iowa. So
that's great.
Those numbers look just even more disproportionate through the retest opportunities. That came closer, and in some regards, slightly more diverse at the end when students were enrolled.
Got it. I just think like this is such a good and clear example, I think, of what an equity check across a system could look like, to see like, are we getting different outcomes than we want based on race? And if so, are we doing something about it? I will say it like makes me feel a little bit better that the story is blue to yellow instead of blue to orange. I do think that even expanding out a little bit though, I was very moved by the numbers on how many kids come from schools and from different schools, and that there are schools that don't even have a single student who's eligible for Walnut. And I think that it opens up, just a broader conversation about what would it look like to have an admissions policy for Walnut Hills that is really in line with both our equity policy and our anti-racism policy. And one of the, like, and you could think creatively about this. Like, one idea could be, do we have certain slots that we reserve every year so that at least 2 kids from each school can go? Or if we're saying, like, you got to be in top 70th percentile on Iowa, what if we said anybody in the top 70th percentile within their school, like, would have the, and there are probably lots and lots of different ways to do it. But one of the things I wanted to suggest was could we put together a group to look at this, that would include, like a diverse cross section of people inside and outside CPS, to take some time, look at this, and make a recommendation to say, we've got a new anti-racism policy. What would it look like to have a really thoughtful approach to Walnut admissions that would be, I think, more expansive than solely testing? It doesn't have to mean zero testing, but that feels like an important and interesting body of work, and I wanted to see what people thought about it.
Well, Mr. Lindy, great minds think alike. Justin and I, on our own, have been doing extensive research across the nation, and we have a database of different school districts and what they're doing, and we're more than happy to share that with you. But there is a lot of work and discussion around the country of how to have a more inclusive entrance requirement. So there's a lot of work that we have started, but we have not opened it up to a committee, but just something that we have done on our own to just start having that conversation amongst us.
And I don't mean to suggest that, like, it need to be with a committee. I think it's really exciting that that's something you all are thinking about. I think the thing that felt important to me was just that line of thinking got picked up somewhere by a group or an individual who really want to figure out what would it look like to do that in as thoughtful a way as possible. And I think that sounds great. Thank you.
Righty. Thank you, everybody, for I'm sorry. Committee Member Bolton.
Just quickly, yes. We can have impact on this because we had impact when we decided that the gifted testing that we were using was not inclusive enough or capturing the great talents of so many of our kids. And it changed significantly the number of our students who are available to do that. It also helped create the Spencer Center as well. So I think Mr. Lindy's point is good. We periodically do this, and I think that's great. And I appreciate the deputy mentioning the 5th and 6th grade. As you know, bless his heart, Mr. Nelms and I have always wanted to, and I still have to do his work for him since he left us too early, the idea that 4th, 5th, and 6th grade all need to be having much more rigorous college preparatory work. And it has to be, and we have to get out of our frame of mind, and I think we've evolved, is less remediation and more of that rigor with the great support. So that is, to the deputy's point, it is about curriculum, and it is about rigor, and it is about making 4th, 5th, and 6th grade actually get the kids ready for high school. Because what's happening is that many of them are not, from our neighborhood schools, aren't ready for any of our high schools. It's not just about Walnut, and we have to figure out how we can make them more competitive. And I, again, want to emphasize that Center for Success at Walnut. It wouldn't be a bad idea to be able to identify 60 of every one of our 7th and 8th grade classes at all of our high schools to keep our kids, the kids that might be marginal in some way, shape, or form, and give them that additional support. So really appreciate the presentation. Right. Oh, and it was social studies curriculum that started it. I just have to remind the deputy.
I figured you'd say that.
Justin led the charge. Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for the presentation and for the comments from the committee members. Those were all very good comments for us to think about. All right. Next on the agenda is how we are doing graduation-wise. Assistant Superintendent Murphy.
No, that would be me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
And it's a quick update. Last time, Connie Ray-Rouse gave you the official update. We exceeded the strategic plan from 79% to 82%. For this cohort group of 2021, our practice is to do graduation audits, and those have been completed. Right now, we are about at 70% of our kids on track. So now we are developing individualized plans to ensure that they have enough credits or pathways to move forward in graduation. So hopefully we'll come back to you with the final number.
So Deputy Superintendent Ahmad, before I ask committee members, you said 82% graduated last year, or we're on track of 82% graduating this year?
That was last year.
Okay, that's what. Okay, yeah. So the 70% is the kids that are on track right now, that we have plans for. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that because I have heard that there have been some struggles with our high schoolers during this pandemic from school counselors. It is behooves me that 70 to me seems to be higher than what I thought it was in the pandemic. But that was a rainbow, even though it's not where we were last year. But I'm glad that we are back to blended learning, or moving back for our high schoolers in another week to try to expedite this to our goal, because there was some concerning issues from our school counselors as to where they are in progression to graduation, because with the situation of the pandemic.
And just quickly, Mr. Leach met with all the counselors to update the files, so we inform parents. So our goal is to have the letter out for each individual student where there's gaps for graduation requirements. So that will be done at the end of the month, and they should get their letters by March 1st, really encouraging them to come back to blended learning in person. So we are working in collaboration with Ms. Murphy's department as well. She works with the counselors to have that information communicated out to families.
Committee members, comments, questions? All righty. Moving along, I believe we have, Krista's not presenting. She sent me an email regarding the Chevy at Marquis. How are we doing with that?
Robin, Brandon, are you still on?
Robin has been sent an invite to participate. She has not accepted yet.
Okay, she's in the attendees, Rob. I see her down at attendees.
Yeah, we've sent her an invite. She has not responded yet, so she may not be at her computer or... Oh, there she is.
Okay. Miss Brandon, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. So a quick update on the Chevy at Marquis. We have added another panel sign to the marquee that says Chevy at School on Harrison Avenue. So that work is complete. So now the school has a marquee sign with the school designation on Harrison, as well as one on McFerrin, which is at the rear of the school, which is the functional entrance to the school. So now we have one at the ceremonial entrance as well as the functional entrance.
Oh, good to hear. So next time I walk past there, Miss Brandon, I'll see it.
You will see it.
Thank you. All right. Other business, just to remind the committee that we are within our timeline for the superintendent's evaluation. I think our date is March 1st. I did send you something to keep with you to review at her she reviewed at her midpoint check-in on December 16th. But also I have the Ohio standards that the board had agreed to allow her to identify the areas for her to focus on, and I'm going to send that out to you guys to have that also. And I believe the superintendent is slated to present to us an update, a report on her progress on, I want to say, February 22nd at that board meeting. And at that time, that will give us a week or so timeline for us to complete her evaluation based on that, and a review of her Ohio standards that I will send to you guys along with that midpoint check-in that she did in December. And so we will, that's just a note for us to keep that in mind. Committee Member Bolton.
Yes, the treasurer's on the same timeline, so we will be able to meet both of our charges, so to speak, as well.
Okay. Okay. Now, Mr. Lindy, you were going to make a comment or inquire regarding that.
Thanks, Pam. I appreciate it. I had a couple different questions. I think if I wanted to first ask questions about like the arc of a standard year and when different things happen, and then check to make sure I was following that by seeing kind of where in that arc we are now. And then depending on the answers to those, I might have a couple follow-up questions or I might not. And I'm just grateful for everybody's help in trying to get all this stuff straight in my head. In a standard year, like when the superintendent gets her evaluation, I know we have, like when we did this last year, we had a series of things that came from, I think, was it the Leadership Development Institute? Was that the right name of it?
I believe so, but I think we made some changes as a request from the board in alliance with the superintendent's request to follow the Ohio standards guidelines.
Maybe that's what it was.
Is that correct, Superintendent Mitchell?
Yes, I was asked to review the possible behaviors part of the evaluation to update it. And in June, I provided to the SAC committee the proposal to use the Ohio superintendent standards.
Yep. So am I right then in thinking that when we get, like last year we got from Paul an invitation to take this, and I don't think I'm sharing anything that's confidential. This is like just everybody got a chance to share feedback on the superintendent, and we did that through a Survey Monkey type instrument. And
right.
We'll do that again. And then so what I'm taking away is like when we're prompted, like, how do you think the superintendent did on blank? The thing that'll be in the blank is what Laura updated in June. That's now aligned with the superintendent standards. Is that right?
Right, which I have to send you. I have that to send you in the email.
There's no problem.
Yeah.
I think so. My one follow-up question I have then is like, do we ever provide, is part of our analysis is part of our feedback and evaluation on the superintendent tied not to standards but to numbers? Like, is there any part of the evaluation where there's like a goal, like a measurable outcome that we're saying, like, we think the superintendent did superb, terrible, somewhere in the middle, but it's not tied to a standard with words, it's tied to a number. Is that a current part of our evaluation system?
I don't. Board Member Bolton, I just don't think that there is outside of the strategic plan goals that we have with numbers and measures and percentages.
And are we?
I think
go ahead.
For the first year, I think for the first year of the strategic plan, it was quite numeric, if I recall correctly. And then board members were like, there's way too many questions here, way too many details, and what have you. And so I think there was an attempt to get the board thinking bigger, because if you get too much into, I won't call them the weeds, but if you get too much into that, then the board's not doing board work. It's just managing the superintendent instead of helping her go beyond. So then that's when I think they got shorter. And the superintendent's always been very, very willing and moves the board along pretty hard on finding outside sources, as you referenced, regarding the leadership folks. I know over some time she's brought to us what a business CEO or whatever would be bringing to us. And I think this was an attempt, which was great, but this was an attempt to raise the board's efforts. And I think as well on the strategic plan, the numbers have been, this has been accomplished or this has not been accomplished. And that was quite specific, if I recall. And now I think it's gone to a broader stroke. But Chairman, wasn't there a more recent update than June by the superintendent to SAC?
December. That's what I had sent you guys in the second
okay,
email.
yeah, okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd be using that, then she would be kind of, that's sort of not a repeat, but an embellishment of whatever was in December that she would be presenting to the whole board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So I appreciate all that. I think for my part, I think there are two things that I want to advocate for. And I can't quite tell yet whether they're things I want to advocate for like in the very near term, or whether they're things to advocate for next year, or a combination. Because one thing I don't want to do is change standards on the superintendent in the middle of the year, because that feels unfair to anybody who's in that position. I do also want to set us up so that we get, this is I've been talking about this for a while with everybody, but that we get very clear on the small number of measurable outcomes that we think the superintendent is responsible for. And we focus on those things, and we create real visibility into those things. To that end, there are, I think, two things that feel very important to me. One of them is, I think we have to find a way to move Laura's evaluation from March to after the end of the academic year, when we actually have numbers on how kids did. And I understand that there is some state law involved here, but what I understand is that the state law says you have to do it before a certain date if you're not going to renew the superintendent. I don't think any of us are considering not renewing Laura. And I checked with some other school districts, and they evaluate their superintendents at the end of the summer, once they have data on how kids did at the end of the year. And these are school districts in Ohio. So it's not impossible. And I think it would just put us in a position to be able to give such better feedback, because we'll know what happened with kids. And that, to me, doesn't feel like something we'd need to wait on. And so I wanted to advocate for that and see what you all thought.
I think that you raised a good point, Committee Member Lindy. And from my understanding, for Paul, I was under the understanding that the March was something that was required by state. Now, I'm not sure what happened in the other district, but that's what. Okay, well, so that we'll have to have clarification for that. Committee Member Eve.
The question is what? It's okay. You didn't call me Melanie, so there you go. The thing I'd say is that March 1st is a state requirement that the superintendent's evaluation / status is determined by the board. So that is true for the treasurer as well. What the school board policy requires too is that date, but more particularly what it requires is that as the superintendent begins her next evaluation cycle, she is to submit that, as is the treasurer, prior to the academic year. So what has happened in our district is that we determine the superintendent's, we have to determine her status based on something, not just that we like her. So you have to have some formal evaluation prior to March 1st, which we do. But then as we go through spring, and the superintendent's the first one to always remind us as to what data and when that data is coming in to evaluate the success, not necessarily of the superintendent only, but the success of the district. And then after that data comes in at the end of the year, that's when she formulates her next priorities. And that's, as you mentioned, do we do something in the near term? No, we don't. What you would be looking to do is try to do that so that as the superintendent determines the next phase, that's when you might want to build in what you're talking about. And I think we were moving sort of in that direction, at least by limiting the number of things that we were holding her particularly accountable for. So that would, what you're talking about would probably influence or inform what she then does for her end of the school year prior to the next academic year evaluation goals for us. And all that's required there is that she's in keeping with our vision, mission, and our particular goals. So we have to have goals too.
Yeah.
By that time.
I do think I see some of that differently, Eve. Like, I think we only did the Survey Monkey in March. We didn't do the Survey Monkey in the summer. after we got additional information. We
Well,
made the
last summer was we were in a state of war last summer. So I mean, again, your 1 year,
maybe
was it was truly exceptional. Thank God we got through that. Yeah.
I want to push on this just a little bit more too, because we made the comp decisions based on the discussion in March and based on the surveys that we did in March, rather than after we saw the academic data for the year. And so I think one thing I was hoping we could do.
Mr. Lindy, the reason for that was that we were in the midst of COVID beginning on the Ides of March. And what the district was doing was trying to get through it. In normal years, what you're really talking about of watching the data and going through, and her or previous superintendents selecting their goals for the year or targets for the year, that would normally be happening through that spring and be ready for the beginning of the academic year.
But then if that's the case, then that would make this really easy. And so what we could do is we could clarify to everybody that the thing we're doing in March isn't so much Laura's evaluation as it's a formal moment to satisfy our statutory obligation. But I think we should do the SurveyMonkey piece and the comp decision at the end of the summer when we have student data for the full academic year.
Well, we're going to do the SurveyMonkey in March, and then if you want to do that again, that June revelation, if you will, is more the evaluation of whether or not the board's done its work or whether or not the district's done its work and whether or not the superintendent and treasurer have done what they needed to do.
Yeah, I think we're advocating for different things, and that's okay.
I'm sure we are.
I think what I wanted to see in this committee meeting, whether we as a committee could make a recommendation to the board at the next board meeting, that we modify our timeline to make it, I think, we just make more sense in the context of the superintendent's job. And that recommendation to me would have two parts to it. The first is that after we have student learning data for the academic year, and I think the superintendent would know whether that's June or July or September, but when we have those numbers, we do two things. The first is that's when we have the comp discussion. And the second is whether or not we do the SurveyMonkey piece in March, we certainly do it around those numbers so that we can reflect that as an important part of our evaluation. That's my position. I don't know if there's a majority for it in our committee or not, but this is folks have said this is the place to have that conversation. So I wanted to.
Sure. No, I'm not supportive of doing that at this time. I'd like to think about what you're suggesting, and I think it makes sense. And indeed, the superintendent's standards about being evaluated after she gets more data in that's a matter of history. So I wouldn't do it right now, but I think it can inform how she develops the academic goals for the following year. But more particularly, I think we ought to go back to where we are evaluating ourselves as to our success as well as the district's success when we have that kind of data. I know that's something that President Jones has always talked about too. So I right now I wouldn't be in support of trying to change anything at this time. My least worry in all of everything in the whole district is the superintendent's performance or the treasurer's performance. Right now, I'm so much worried about everything else.
I would agree with you, Eve. I just do think we make her job unnecessarily difficult. And I'm on a mission to try to do something about that. And can I ask Pam what you think?
Well, I am in agreement I hear your point, and you make a lot of sense. And I think I need more clarity, I believe, from Paul as to how all of this works and why we couldn't do what you're saying or why that would be an issue. That sounds more like a midpoint to me when you talk about September than December would have been in reference to her extending updates based on the end of the year data. That makes sense to me. But again, I'm not sure of all the scheme of things on why we haven't done that. Because it is kind of like we're taking data from last school year, really, and evaluating her on this school year together. It's like we're putting things together like that. So I don't know. It would really beg for a bigger discussion with the bigger group as to how the board is what I'm talking about. The board in general.
Madam Chair, Could I just
Yes.
interject? All this data always is late.
Okay.
Even when you talk in terms of the report card, we're always being evaluated on the previous year. The graduation rate, all this stuff. It'd be great if the state would somehow coordinate this, but just like the
Align with
board,
that, right.
yeah, and it's not. So
Yeah,
I think
I
there's
just want
ways
to
we
offer
can
that
adjust it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I'll be quiet about this, I promise. I just want to offer that other districts in Ohio have figured out how to do it. Sycamore is the one in particular that I spoke to, and they make part of their superintendent's evaluation data on student performance from the academic year. That's why they don't hold that evaluation until, I think they told me September, but I might be making that up. So it's maybe difficult, but I don't, to Pam, to your point, like if the right next step is to take this discussion to a board matters piece or something, that's great with me. I just want to say thank you.
One last thing. I know that school boards have to determine the status and the employment status of the superintendent and treasurer by March 1st. You're either going to do that with some data or you're going to do it based upon something else. I think it makes sense to evaluate the district and superintendent and the treasurer and the board when you have more of that data. That makes complete sense. It also, with that more data, it also allows the superintendent to help lead us as to what we need to work on next, which is part of her function. But I would say that this can be done in a good discussion down the road. I would prefer that if we have a larger discussion, this discussion then take place at this time more in an executive session experience. Okay. Just because at this moment in time, I don't want anybody to think we're worried about what people will misread. Will really misread the discussion. Yeah. I think Mr. Lindy's points are all well taken. But this is the last thing we want to have a public discussion about. But I do think we can figure out ways to better utilize the data, if indeed the state even has data this year. So that's a question too.
That is true. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lindy. That's
so what is the next step?
Well, what we'll do is that we could bring this up until I agree with Board Member Bolton about the executive session discussion about this. Not sure if it's going to be on Monday's agenda, but I mean,
no, it doesn't need to be Monday. It can be sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Anything else regarding other business?
Very quickly. Promise.
Go ahead.
Okay. I want to follow up. I want to follow up on courses. Want to kind of have an understanding of where we are teaching African American history in which high schools, and also I've read a couple of articles about the possibility beginning the year after next that there might be actually from the college boards an AP African American history course coming down the line, which I think is really cool. And the other thing is that along the course of courses, we keep hearing always that people want a life course for our high school students. Mm-hmm. And I'd like us to look into that life course, and then following up on what Mr. Messer mentioned last time we met, and I'm partial, of course, to this, is more civics education. And then, so it's the African American piece, it's the life course, and the increase in civics. And just recently, the folks that are the new people on the Homeland Security Committee in the House of Representatives have been talking about, and they're going to be having hearings about this, is expanding school curriculum in two areas: Holocaust education and digital literacy. And I'd just like to throw those courses out for maybe further discussion, open discussion. I have no plan, but that African American, the history that's there at all of our high schools or not, and whether or not the college board's thinking about AP African American in 2 years, and then this life course, civics, and then what they're talking about in Washington, more Holocaust education because of the rise of anti-Semitism in this country, and digital literacy because of the rise of crazy people on the internet. I mean, so just those things. I just would love to hear. Yeah, I just love to hear our professionals kind of talk about it. I'm not asking for anything except a really cool discussion about all of those possibilities, if it pleases the committee.
I think those are some good points. In addition to your life skills, I'm hoping that was inclusive of financial literacy.
Yes.
Okay, because I know I've heard that a lot also about not knowing a lot about that area from students in high school, across the board, not just in specific schools, but something across the board. So I think those are
great.
A board member, Lindy.
Yeah, this was my last thought, and thank you, Pam. I just wanted to wish everyone a happy African American History Month. I'm glad that's a priority at CPS. I'm glad it's a priority for so many teachers. I will say it's clearly been a priority of my son's kindergarten teacher, who is a teacher. I don't think you need to be an African American person to care about African American History Month. And say thank you, and look forward to seeing everybody next month.
Chairman, Mr. Justin Leach has, in previous 2 years or so ago, actually put together a whole document about financial literacy, and had to send it to the state, I think the state house member or a couple of folks, because our state representatives were concerned about financial. I know he's already got a document about that, but I think too the idea is really embellishing it possibly at the high school level. I know we do a lot of it at the grade level, so if he could maybe share that. He did a great job getting those state reps informed a couple of years ago, and it helped us a lot.
Great. Right in alignment, Justin. You're on the front lines now.
So I think we'll get with Mr. Dave Traubert, our current social studies manager, and make sure to get an up-to-date version of that.
Be great.
All right. Anything else, committee members? We are well over our time. We're going to do better next time. Maybe not have as many community presenters. We had a lot. All right. If nothing else, you guys enjoy your weekend.
Have a good weekend.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.